I test vintage manual focus lenses on digital. In this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus, I will explain why. I own a bunch of vintage manual focus lenses from Canon, Minolta, Nikon, Pentax, and others. I love these old lenses. I got started in photography in the early 70s, and there were so many of these lenses and cameras that I wanted. Of course, at the time, I basically had one SLR. I had a Pentax H1A, traded that in for a Pentax Spotmatic, then went to a Nicormat, and I only had a few lenses, but I really wanted a lot of the others that I couldn't have, that I couldn't afford. So in recent years, ever since I went mirrorless, I picked a lot of them up from all these various manufacturers. And the great thing with the mirrorless camera is that you can use them all with inexpensive adapters. So, but why do I test them on digital? Why don't I use a film camera? Now I have Minoltas, Pentaxes, Mamiyas, of course Nikons, Canons. I have a bunch of single lens reflex 35mm cameras that a lot of these lenses will work on, right? Of course the Canon lenses will work on the Canon, the Nikon on the Nikon, and so forth. But with mirrorless, on my Nikon Z8, I can use them all. Now, I don't test on film because, well, there's several reasons. One, film is just so expensive today. Processing, the film itself, and then you have to digitize it. Otherwise, I would have to have prints made, and that would get to be expensive. Or I would have to project slides to see them large and to evaluate the optical quality of these lenses. So it's just more convenient to shoot them on digital, on mirrorless. But there's other reasons as well. You know, back in the day when I shot film, I was much younger, and I had no trouble focusing lenses. Wide angles, once I went to Nikon, once I went to a Nikon F, I would use a split image screen, and it made it easier to focus the wide angles. But I really had no trouble focusing a 51.4 or my 105 2.5. I did really well, got a very high percentage of sharp images, in focus images. And the other thing, I was able, back in those days, I was much steadier than I am today. I was able to handhold a 50mm lens down to about a 1/15 of a second. Now, I didn't get 100% of those images sharp, but a really good percentage. I would just brace myself. I didn't hold my breath. Some people say to hold your breath. And I did a video on tips on holding a camera steady, and I'll put a link in the description below to that video. But I was much steadier than I am today. And the beautiful thing, one of the many beautiful things about a mirrorless camera, many mirrorless cameras, is that they have in-body image stabilization. So I could take this 28mm 3.5 Minolta Rocore lens from the 1960s, put it on my Z8 with the proper adapter, and I have image stabilization, which to me is just fantastic. So it opens up all these lenses to greater use for me. So while I have all these film bodies, and you say, well, they're just sitting on a shelf. Well, I just like them, okay? I collect them. I didn't pay a lot of money for them. The only one that I paid a good bit of money for was my Nikon F2AS. And when I do shoot film on the rare occasion, that's the body I will choose. In fact, this year in 2025, it is now September when you'll be seeing this. I have only shot one roll of film, and that was a roll of Ektachrome slide film. So you could pick up these manual focus lenses very inexpensively. Yeah, you're going to pay more for the exotic ones, the high-speed ones, the 85 1.4s, or the 55 millimeter 1.2s, but many of them, many of the normal lenses, the 28 3.5s, I forget what I paid for this Minolta, but it wasn't that much. You could get them really cheap, experiment with them, and test them on your mirrorless camera. Also, the adapters are very inexpensive. Most of the adapters I have are Photassi, and for example, this MD to Nikon Z for the Minolta lenses, I think it was like $15. So they are very cheap. Now, I also have a lot of Z-mount lenses, which are fantastic, autofocus Z-mount lenses, but sometimes I prefer to use a manual focus lens. So when does that, why is that? When do I do that? One, I like the look of some of them. They just look different. The images look different. They have that retro look to them. It's hard to exactly put into words, but if you saw the images side by side, I think you may be able to tell, but I just like the look. They're not as sharp. They're not as clinically sharp. They don't do as well in backlight with the sun in the frame or just out of the frame. The newer lenses are just fantastic with coatings. And they're also smaller and lighter. Now, right here, I have one of my favorite manual focus lenses. One of my favorite high-speed manual focus lenses. It's the Canon New FD 50mm 1.4. Right now I have it mounted to the Photassi adapter. And here I have my 50mm 1.4 Nikon Z mount. An excellent lens by all accounts. I did a test of lenses a while back, what did I call it? A tournament of lenses. And you could look back for that video. Well, there were several videos on that. And I think what it came down to at the end with all these lenses, I tested some 26 lenses if I remember right. The 51.4 Nikkor Z-mount just edged out the Canon. And this Canon lens dates from probably around 1974, while this Nikkor is only about a year old. But look at the difference. Now this is the Canon on the adapter. Next to the Nikon, of course, the Nikon lens does not need an adapter. Not only is the Canon lens with the adapter shorter, it's also not as wide. The Nikon lens takes 62mm filters. The Canon lens takes 52mm filters. So they're smaller and lighter. So if you want to travel light, choose a manual focus lens. Now, I was mentioning my Minolta lens earlier, this 28 3.5, and I love this lens for street photography on my Z8. So I will mount it to the Z8. You will set in the camera non-CPU lens data that enables you to take advantage of the in-body image stabilization. And with these lenses, with these manual focus lenses, you're limited to aperture priority, where you select the aperture on the lens, and the camera will select the shutter speed, or full manual control. So when I'm doing street photography with this 28mm Minolta lens, I will have it pre-focused at 10 feet. And at 10 feet, with an aperture of f8, everything is sharp, acceptably sharp, from 5 feet, approximately 5 feet, to infinity. So you don't even have to worry about focus. You just point and shoot. You just raise the camera to your eye and shoot. And that's great if you're photographing people in the city, and you just grab some shots. They don't even know you're taking their picture. Now, I just want to show you something else. I also have this Olympus 28 3.5, and the Olympus lenses are great. I actually had 3 of them. I had a 100 2.8 and I had a 50 1.8. I ended up selling them. I just have too many lenses. But I really love this 28 because it's so small and compact. So here, let's look. Let me take the cap off the Minolta. So here we have the Olympus 28-35 next to the Minolta 28-35. And you could see it's smaller both in length and in width, and it's lighter, and they're great little lenses. Okay, so what is the focus advantage? I spoke about the IBIS. I spoke about pre-focusing with the manual focus lens on the digital camera. Of course, you could do that with the film camera as well. But what about focusing? Of course, you're using an autofocus camera, but you have a manual focus lens, so you obviously don't have autofocus, but you have some help with the digital camera. One of the things you have is focus peaking. And as you focus the lens, the outlines of the subject, the edges of the subject, will light up in red when the image is in focus. Now, you can set 4 different colors on the Z8. I'm not sure about other manufacturers, but you have 4 different colors to choose from. I usually just keep it set to red. So when it lights up in red, I know I'm in focus. And for even more precise focus, you can zoom in up to 400% into the image. So you put the focus box over the eye, let's say, of a portrait subject, and you could zoom in up to 400% to precisely focus. Now, obviously, you're not going to do that for action, sports, birds, a football game, tennis match, whatever. There, I would always use the autofocus lens, especially for birds in flight. There's no way you're going to keep up with manual focus, although I guess back in the day, some photographers did. So that is a huge advantage, because if I do use my f2.8s, I really have to carefully focus. I use the split image screen, even with the 50mm lens, just find a straight edge to focus on, and it's much slower than just zooming in on the Z8, achieving focus, and then pressing the shutter release. One of the many nice things about the Z8, I have the OK button on the back of the camera pre-programmed to zoom in 100%. And I just press that button. The camera will zoom in to wherever I have the focus box. I then focus, and then just by putting light pressure on the shutter release, it gives me back the full image. It gets out of that zoom mode. So it's really great, much quicker than a film camera, at least for me. One of the other great things with reviewing images on the mirrorless camera is, yes, you can view it on the back of the LCD, but on a bright sunny day, it's difficult sometimes to evaluate an image on the LCD. All you do is put your eye to the viewfinder. That blocks out all that light, and you get a nice clear view of your image in the EVF, and you could zoom into that to make sure you achieve proper focus. So there are a lot of advantages to testing on a digital camera. And of course, you get back home, take the card out of the camera, plug it into your card reader, and now you have all those images available to you on your computer. If you were shooting film, as I said earlier, you would probably have to make a print to evaluate it or project a slide. And if you wanted to evaluate it on your computer, now there's another step involved. They have to be digitized. You have to scan them. Sometimes I will use the Nikon ES2 unit to digitize my slides, and that works out well, but it's another step. You got to make sure the images, the film or the slides are clean. So it's a lot more involved, and you're losing some image quality doing that, because now there's another step. There's another lens involved on the digital camera. So why not just shoot your manual focus lenses on your mirrorless camera? Now, DSLRs can work with some of these advantages, but you can't use a Canon lens on a Nikon camera. You don't have on most DSLRs, I think Pentax is the only one that gives you in-body image stabilization. So you have a lot of advantages using a mirrorless camera. And of course, shooting on the mirrorless camera, there's no cost to you. Once you have the equipment, once you have the computer and your collection of manual focus lenses, and as I mentioned earlier, you don't have that cost of processing, printing, and if you have the lab do it, of scanning those film images. Now also, if I were shooting film, there is no way that I could evaluate as many lenses as I do. It's a more time-consuming process, especially if you have to send the film out for processing, you have to wait for it to come back. I could go out in the morning with a particular manual focus lens mounted on my camera, and early afternoon, I could be back at my computer evaluating those images. Now, if you exclusively shoot film or primarily shoot film, I recommend you test your lenses on film, because that's what your end product is going to be. It's going to be a film image or a print or a slide that you're going to project. So that's probably the better way for you to test your lenses. And you'll know how those lenses perform on film. How they perform on digital may be different. Now for me, since I shoot digital almost exclusively, I much prefer to test my lenses on digital. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments below. I always try to respond to all questions and comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you then.